Today's lesson is 1.4, Midpoints and Bisectors. We're going to go ahead and do this lesson in 2 different days due to a diagnostic test that we must take. So this first video is going to talk about midpoints, and in the second video, we will talk about bisectors. Your assignment will be in Schoology after the second video. So once you have seen both lessons, then you will go ahead and you will have your lesson in Schoology. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, the midpoint formula is, as such, M, my midpoint. So this right here, this capital M, there we go, this capital M right here stands for midpoint. And it's very common for me to choose that variable, that letter, for the midpoint of a segment, but it's not necessary. To simply find the midpoint, all I have to do are take my two x values, x1 and x2, and add them together. I'm going to add them together, and I'm going to divide them by 2. Then I'm going to notice there's a comma in here because I'm doing an ordered pair. I'm going to take my x value or y values, y1 and y2, and I'm going to add them together again and divide by 2. Notice that it is an ordered pair, so you do have that structure of the parentheses and, of course, the comma here in the middle. All right, let's go ahead and practice. Let's go ahead and practice. The midpoint of a segment, is the point that divides a segment into 2 equal parts. Okay, so when I talk about the midpoint, I'm talking about being exactly in the middle of the segment. Okay, so this is one way that I'm moving from that idea of being between to being exactly in the center. It's the same distance from one end point as it is to the other. All right, so if my endpoints A x1, x1, y1, and B x2, y2 are endpoints of my coordinate plane, then my midpoint of segment AB has the coordinates of x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So notice that we're adding here, and we're just going to go ahead and use the formula. Now I'm going to be coming back to this, this coordinate grid, and I'm going to be showing you another way that you could do the formula, that we could be doing the one of the formulas, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. Find the coordinates of the midpoint of segment AB if the endpoint A is at -2, 3, and the endpoint B is at -4, -2. So the first thing I would do is I would grab my highlighter and I would look for the word midpoint. Now I'm looking also to see, are they asking me to find the midpoint or did they give me the midpoint? Because these are the two things that I can do. I can ask you to find it or I can actually give it to you. So notice that it's saying find the coordinates of the midpoint. So I'm just going to simply use that formula from the last page. So I need to come in here and I need to label my x1, y1, x2, y2. Remember, every ordered pair contains an x and a y value. So the first value is always x and the second value is always y. It does go alphabetically. Remember, the last part of the alphabet is x, y, z. Now I know my ABCs, right? So x comes before y, and it does that for both of your ordered pairs, both A and B. Now we're just going to simply come back and call the first ones at A 1 and the second ones at B 2. My second point, my first point A, my second point B. That's all that x1, y1 means. That's all that x2, y2 means. Remember that a 1 must stay with a 1. It's almost like they've decided to get married. Just like me and Mr. Palmer, we're going to stay together, the Palmers, the ones. Okay. And then the 2s will be another couple. Okay. Or we could be the 2s and someone else could be the ones. It doesn't matter. But what it doesn't mean is that I can't be in a group with someone else. So I can't have a 1 with a 2. Okay, we can't have an X1 with a Y2. We can't have that. We also cannot have a pair that's an X with a Y, or sorry, an X with an X. We want to have an X with a Y, but we cannot have a pair that's an X with an X. And that's a very common mistake that I see made. We come in here and we say, well, this is X1, so this is X2. So this is Y1 and this is Y2. Remember, an ordered pair cannot have a Y and a Y because then I don't know how to move on the coordinate grid. How do I move? If I come back to this graph, how do I move 1 on the X and then 1 and then 2 on the X? So I moved 1 and then what, now I move 2 more? It doesn't make any sense. To put my point here, I can't talk about this point as being 2 and 0 because I guess it didn't move again. I can't talk about it as in just in terms of X, right? I have to talk about it in terms of X and of Y. So I have to count this in terms of X, right? And I have to count it in terms of Y, okay? So that I can talk about this ordered pair 2, 2, okay? All right, here we go. So let's just plug it into the formula, and you can write down the formula if you want, or you could just go back to the last page and let's go ahead and plug it in. The midpoint M is going to be x1 negative 2 plus x2 negative 4 divided by 2, comma 3 plus negative 2 divided by 2. Okay, always a good idea to set it up. What I'm going to show you here is that I'm actually going to do the addition and then I'm going to do my dividing by 2. I like to do it step by step because I don't really trust those calculators on art boxes. No, actually I do. I can show you guys a trick in class how to put this exactly in that calculator, and it'll do the adding and the dividing all for you. But negative 2 times negative 4 would be negative 6. And then 3 plus negative 2 would be positive 1. Negative 6 divided by 2 would be negative 3. And when I put 1 over 2 in the calculator, it is going to stay 1 over 2. There is my midpoint. Okay, there is my midpoint. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to go back to that graph on the first page, and I would like to show you another method for doing this. So let's go ahead and let's use our graph. Remember, this is your x-axis, the one that goes horizontally from left to right. And this is your y-axis that goes vertically up and down. All right, so the first point we had A was at negative 2, positive 3. Remember, the negative 2 means from the origin, from where the two axes intersect, you're going to go 2 to the left. And then the positive 3 means I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 up. Here would be point A. Let's go ahead and add that to the graph. Point A. And then point B was at negative 4. So once again, from the origin, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it was negative 2. 1, 2. There would be point B. See if I can remember where it was. Oops, I didn't grab my pen. There we go. And then I could just go ahead and connect these together. There we go. Now, simply to do the midpoint with a graph instead of the formula, all I have to do is the slope. You guys remember the slope, right? You start at the lower point, which in this case would be B, and you simply move in an upwards direction until you are even with the next point, which is A. Once you have moved up, you of course need to count. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It's 5 up. Then from that point, you take a turn and you turn towards the next point, which is A in this case, and then you count how far it took you to get to point A. 1, 2. We are talking about the midpoint, and remember the definition is right up above. It is two equal parts. So all I have to do is come back and divide both of these by 2. All I need to do is come back and divide this by 2, which gives me 1, and divide this by 2, which gives me 2.5. So I'm going to go up 1, 2.5, and then I'm going to go 1 over. Here is my midpoint M, and take a look. It is at the exact point that we said it was, 1, 2, 3, -3.5. It is exactly where we said it was going to be. So if you do not want to use the formula, you can go ahead and grab a graph and start counting. It will work, okay? All right, let's try another one. If the endpoints of segment RS is R5, -3, and the midpoint is M2, 4, find the coordinates of the other endpoint S. Let me grab my black pen back. Remember, we always want to highlight that word midpoint, but notice what they're telling you here. The midpoint is. They want me to find the coordinates of the other endpoint. They don't want the coordinates of the midpoint. Now, what I am going to do for this problem is I have to use the formula. So let me go ahead and write it down. Plus x2 divided by 2. And I'm just copying this off of the front part of the form of the chart of my foldable. And I'm just going to remind myself that I'm adding. All right, here we go. Now, one thing that I am going to change about this formula, I'm going to change the capital letter M. So I'm going to just come in here and I'm going to erase this capital letter M, and I'm going to change it to an ordered pair. Okay, now what I'm going to call this is x of m, y of m. Because I already have x1, x2 on the other side, I want xm, ym. Okay, now that midpoint is this one right here. So there's my xm and my ym. Here are my xm and my ym. And so here are my x1 and my y1. What am I finding? I'm finding x2 and y2. So let's go ahead and plug in. X of m is going to be 2. Y of m is going to be 4. And I'm going to put them in parentheses. X1 is 5 plus x2. And then I have y1 is -3 plus y2 over 2. Now, this is confusing. I really have to say, this is quite confusing. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these into two separate problems. The comma is going to dictate who goes with who. But just a very quick reminder, this is your XM, and this is your YM. So what's going to go with the 2 from right here? Well, X. Because of this XM, I need to pick the X. So I'm going to set these two equal to each other. Sorry, let me see, 5 plus, and I can drop the x of 2 because I really don't have to have the x2. I can leave it, but sometimes I see that little, even though I know it's a subscript, sometimes I make the mistake that I think I have to square it. Okay, so it's okay to drop it. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make my formula with my y. So I'm going to set this y equal to this y. Maybe the laser was a better representation. And once again, I can go ahead and I can drop the y of 2, and then just think about it as 2. All right, I have two problems to solve here, and what they're going to do is they're going to give me that endpoint that I asked for in the example, which is f. So here we go. To solve this equation, I actually must get rid of the division bar first. Um, because it is acting like parentheses, okay? If you think about PEMDAS, right? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. You have to get rid of those parentheses first. Now, some teachers don't like to use PEMDAS, they like to use GEMDAS because they're really grouping symbols. And this is exactly why we like to say GEMDAS, because this is a grouping symbol. It wants you to get rid of that dividing first and then do the adding on the top. So we're going to get rid of the division by multiplying because remember, we don't like fractions very much. Look, this gets rid of our fraction. There we go. Oh, I should have drawn my bar through the line. And now look at the problem. The x is over here all by itself. All I have to do is get rid of the addition or subtraction by doing the opposite. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract the 5. Remember, when you eliminate, you're doing it from one side to the other. When you combine, you're doing it on the same side. So just a reminder, 4 minus 5 would be -1, and here is the value of my x endpoint, okay? Now, what I really like about this is I'm going to solve the y equation in the exact same way because they're mirror images of each other. They only change their variables because we're talking about the x point and then we're talking about the y point. So let's go ahead and multiply by 2 because remember we want to get rid of that fraction. That would be 8. 2 times 4 is 8. And then take a look at this. Once again, we're just getting rid of that plus or minus. Now be careful. Be careful. We're right over here. It looks like we got to get rid of plus, but it's really a -3. So we have to go ahead and add. Remember, you always want when you cancel that they're making 0. So if you're ever not sure, you can always check it in a calculator. And 8 plus 3 would be 11. There's my ordered pair. They called it S, right? Yep. So S is the ordered pair -1, comma 11. Now you might be thinking, Miss, the graph would have been a lot easier. Well, let's take a look at this last example for our midpoint. Find the coordinates of the missing endpoint of each of the segments. So M is the midpoint of segment, let me put my bar up there, of segment AB with A at 0, 1. Let's go ahead and graph that and label. Remember in geometry, when we graph, we also label. And N is at 3, 5. Find the coordinates of B. So notice I want to highlight that word midpoint. M is the midpoint. But look what they did. They gave me the midpoint and they said, find the coordinates of B. Well, I'm just going to use my slope. I'm going to use my rise over my run. Now, if you really want to, I can show you the equation again, but I want to show you how you can also use the slope to do this. So I'm going to go up. Oops, let me grab my blue. I'm going to go up until I'm even with point M, and I'm going to go back and count that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go over. I'm going to run over until I'm even. Oops, there we run over till I'm even with M. 1, 2, 3. Now, since I have already gone just halfways, right? M is already halfways. All I have to do is mimic the same distance to find B. Now, I need to do this in a certain way. Of course, B has to be somewhere up in here. B can't be here. B can't be there. B can't be here because M is the middle. Okay, so I know it has to do something like that, right? So all I have to do is count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 up, and then 1, 2, 3 over. Right here is point B, and I could even come and connect my line. I'll do it a little bit lighter, but there I go. I could finish my segment, and then all I have to do are find the coordinates of this point. Remember, X comes first, so go down and read the number 6. And then comes Y, so go over and read the Y. There's Y, 9, and that's it. We're done. How that was so much faster. Let's try it one more time. The midpoint of segment CD, the midpoint of segment CD is M, -1, 4. -1, 4. And this would be M. Now notice once again here, the midpoint is, so they're going to ask me to find something else. What are the coordinates of C if D is at 3, -2? This would be D. Okay, so I know these two are going to connect together like this. I kind of need to know where C would be. Well, would C be here? Could this be C? No, because now D is in the middle, and we know that this is the midpoint, right? So if that's the midpoint, C has to be somewhere up here, somewhere. We're going to use the rise over the run to help us out. So remember, you go up until you're even with M and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you're going to go over until you touch M. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now remember, when you go up with doing the slope, it is positive. If you go down, it is negative. If you go right, it is positive, and if you go left, it is negative. Now, we're not doing the slope. We're just using the negative for a directional purpose. So we're just using the -4 to say, hey, go 4 to the left, don't go 4 to the right, okay? So let's go ahead and move 6 up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 4 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. There is point C. I can go ahead and connect to M. There's the rest of my segment, and I can count that point C is at, remember, go down to X first, so go down -5, comma, then go to Y. It's run above 9, so that's got to be 10. Oops, there we go.